Hey everybody, thanks for your flexibility this week in having today's lecture online or virtually. I am going to walk you through the steps of your method and analysis paper and hopefully anticipate any questions you might have. But if after today's lecture or during today you have some questions, here I am up here now, hello, you can navigate to week 7, which is technically the week that we're in. Ask your question in this discussion section, and I'll try to answer it as soon as I can. But keep in mind, I will be at a conference all of Friday and Saturday, so I may not get to your questions right away. All right. And of course, I'll answer individual questions, but this is a great place to start so that because your classmates might have some of the same questions that you have. Alrighty, so let's jump into today's content. So we are all about moving into your method and analysis paper, the next step. You just finished your lit review papers, which I'm going to look over shortly. Make sure that over spring break, you really get a jump on generating those committee member names and getting people's agreement before we get back together that Friday after spring break. And of course, your method and argument papers will be due the next Friday that we meet at class time. So you're going to be busy over these next couple of weeks. Once you have made your way through those components or those assignments, get back to your lit review, take a look at the feedback that I'm going to give you, and correct any errors that you see now to save yourself time later. Some of the feedback you get might also help you write your method and argument paper, so make sure to consult those. And of course, if you have any questions or need clarification about anything I wrote, make sure to reach out to me early with questions. Alrighty. So let's talk about this paper. Before we start this section though, I suggest that you head to Canvas and read all about the requirements for your method and analysis paper. So this is actually housed in week 9, which is when your method paper is due. So take a look at the requirements here and the checklist, maybe print them out before you continue with the rest of today's lecture. Alrighty, so going back to what I was discussing. Alright, so this is just a first pass. I don't expect you to be very comfortable with the language you're using yet, the analysis that you're conducting. This paper is in no way a final draft, so it just gives me a sense of the direction that you're going with your analysis and then how you're planning on incorporating theory into your analysis. So you're practicing writing about your method and conducting your analysis before the final product is due. So don't feel like you have to know exactly what to say and the best way to say it yet. All right. Your goal is to address key assignment components, like I've described them on Canvas, and do your best on this first draft, but I'm not expecting it to be a final draft. All right. We're looking at 6 to 8 pages total. I'll break up each page as we go along here. So this is probably your longest paper yet if your lit review wasn't those 10 pages, but don't fret. I'll help you fill in the blanks. You're required to incorporate 4 or more sources. This does not include any citations that relate to your case studies. So I do expect you, if you're going to be analyzing a website or a social media campaign, I want you to cite those as well, but I'm looking for 4 or more peer-reviewed academic sources. And you can include sources that you already referenced in your lit review as long as they help you explain your method or analysis. All right. So there are 2 parts of this paper, as you may have already realized. There's your method section, which should be roughly 1 to 3 pages, and then the analysis of your actual case studies in which you aim to answer your research question. So I'm going to break those 2 parts down, but already you can see that you're not just writing 8 pages with no direction. I'm going to lead you in the right direction. All right, so let's talk about the method section first. 1 to 3 pages. Some of you are going to have more to say, some of you are going to have less to say. But you can pluck this information straight from your proposal to start with and then elaborate on it. So you're going to describe the worldview, the type of qualitative study you're doing, your specific interest in the project, and then the theoretical lenses or approaches you're taking. So I'm going to approach this analysis through the lens of feminist theory, or I'm going to look for message effects. All right, you take some time unpacking that for us. But I should hear some buzzwords in there like uses and gratifications theory, or some type of theory that it's like your wagon that you're hitching yourself to help you explain what's going on in your case studies. All right, so in addition to describing your worldview, your stake, here's how you unfold that theoretical lens for us. Overview any theory you plan to use briefly, all right, using scholarship most likely. What are some past applications that scholars have used? So how have people used uses and gratifications theory before? List those for me or explain those for me. So if I've never heard of this theory before, I can better understand how it's used. Finally, give me a couple of sentences. Why are these particular lenses helpful for your project? Why is feminist theory particularly helpful for us understanding how gender influences our perceptions of people or whatever? All right. So the second part of your method section is to describe your data collection process. So what are you actually examining? So these are your websites, these are your Instagram posts, these are your user comments, these are your news articles, all right? So the idea is to inform us so that if we were trying to repeat your research process, if I wanted to go find the tweets or find the articles, what would I do? What steps would I take? So what are you analyzing exactly? Where can I find the sample that you analyzed? All right, what's your sample for study? Is it a series of articles, a series of tweets? What are the dates for these artifacts? Where did you search and how to locate your cases? Or what criteria did you follow to find it? I looked at tweets that specifically mentioned this social movement, hashtag Black Lives Matter, for example, hashtag Me Too. All right, then I analyzed the data in these particular ways. I looked for recurring themes. I coded for ongoing issues. I looked for places where people mentioned gender or sexism or inequality or use the phrase Black Lives Matter. All right, I identified particular trends, right? And then how will you actually analyze that data? So I will be interpreting through a feminist theory lens by looking for instances of gender inequality, or I'll look for moments where people reported feeling influenced by the celebrity selling this product on Instagram. All right, so how will you then interpret that data? You don't have to give us your argument yet. Hold on, that's the next section. But how are you going to interpret this data based on the theory that you're using in your research question? Okay, I just gave you a lot there, but remember, your goal with the method section is to lay out or expand on your approach for analysis. So how are you going to take your case study? What is your case study? And then how are you going to examine it in your analysis section? All right, so that's 1 to 3 pages there. And then let's move to the analysis section. This is roughly 4 to 6 pages. You're welcome to go over that if you can or feel inclined to do that, because eventually this analysis section will expand into more like 12 to 15 pages, all right? But here I'm asking you to articulate one major argument or one major direction you're going to answer your research question. So your analysis, let me repeat, is designed to answer the research question that you posed in your proposal. All right, so let's say that in your thesis, I'm eventually going to ask you to make a major argument. I'm going to ask you to answer your research question. So if I'm interested in uncovering what's going on in this artifact, here's what I uncovered in my analysis. And that's going to include two major sub-arguments to your major argument. So I think the best way to understand this is to look at an example. So let's say that I'm interested in analyzing speeches on TV that address major tragedies. All right, that's my area of interest. And so I'm going to look at Bill Clinton's Oklahoma City bombing speech. This was in the 90s in response to a terrorist attack that killed many people, including children, unfortunately. So I want to look at the communication strategies that presidents use to help the nation cope with tragedy on television. All right, so to this end, this is my sample thesis for my fake thesis. I will analyze Clinton's Oklahoma City bombing speech through Neo-Aristotelian and narrative analysis. So those are my lenses, okay? Specifically, Clinton sues the nation after the Oklahoma City bombing through pathos appeals and through a narrative for how to live after tragedy, okay? So the method here, if you had to guess, what is the method that I've laid out in this thesis statement? I know you might be saying something out loud right now, but I can't tell since this is a one-time recording. But basically, this scholar is going to use Neo-Aristotelian analysis and narrative analysis as their method. So they have two different methods, two different theories that they're using. So what did this person find in their thesis? What are the findings? Well, they're going to argue that there are pathos appeals in the speech, and there's a narrative about how to live after tragedy. So those are the findings. Presumably, I would present evidence for my arguments. So here are different appeals to emotion that Clinton uses to comfort his audience. And then here's all the evidence for how he's telling a narrative. And I would bring forward specific text to prove that for you. All right, if you're a little lost, bear with me. Let me show you another way to organize this. For your paper today, or for the next couple of weeks, you're just advancing one argument. All right, you do not have to know your entire argument for how you're going to answer your research question. But what I'd like you to do is advance one argument and make two claims that support that argument. So about 2 to 3 pages per claim. So for example, if your thesis was my Oklahoma City bombing speech, and my whole claim for my whole thesis is that Clinton sues the nation after the bombing through pathos appeals and through a narrative for how to live after tragedy, for my method and analysis paper, I would just advance one part of that argument to turn into myself on Friday. So my main argument 1 to address this thesis is, through a lens of Neo-Aristotelian analysis, I will show how Clinton sues the nation through pathos appeals. Okay? So here's my first sub-argument, or my first piece of evidence. Well, in these lines of the speech, he does the following. And Neo-Aristotelian analysis tells us that a speaker is effective in soothing when they provide X, Y, and Z. All right. Second piece of evidence I will present is blah, 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 blah. All right. So I am going to make one claim that supports my overarching claim for my thesis and then give lots of evidence. All right. And I'm going to explain that, describe that, provide quotes for that. Right. And the rest of my thesis or major argument for the whole thesis I'll cover later. That's what's in the yellow box. All right, I'm going to take a quick break here because my recording is going to cut off, but I'll be right back.